guys, and welcome back to another video. So, because today is Monday, we are going to be doing another spread in my sketchbook, but I thought today would be more of a fun session, I guess I could say, because we are finally halfway through the sketchbook. So, to kind of take you a little bit behind the scenes of whenever I start a new sketchbook, I do like to plan out the front page and the back page, or I guess like the first and the last page of the sketchbook. But even before doing that, I like to count the signatures and the pages, or at least like the pages within the middle signature, to find out where the halfway point is in my sketchbook, even before like working on any spreads or anything like that, just to kind of keep it hidden until I reach this point. So for me, I kind of treat the halfway spread or halfway page as like an indicator and kind of like an extra motivational boost to continue to finish the sketchbook. Because sometimes if I'm not like very motivated to work in my sketchbook, and it may take me several months just to even get to this point, seeing that I'm halfway and being able to pass that point just gives me that little extra motivation to continue, because it's just a little less daunting. I know some people treat their sketchbooks in a way where they will dart around so that there is no start, there is no finish technically, because it's not in chronological order. But for me, I do like working in chronological order if I can, but the only difference is the fact that because I knew that I wanted to film this particular spread, I actually worked on other drawings and illustrations or like sketches and stuff after the spread. I just intentionally kept this one blank for a little while until I had time to actually fully paint it. So my plan was that technically I had no plan in the very beginning. So this is like another reason I kind of left it blank for a little while before returning back to it, and you guys are actually seeing this session. So I ended up taking the little idea I had from a different sketching session where I did a very tiny version of my OC Selwin with these little mini ores. So these are like little star-shaped Pokemon that I really like, and they come in like a bunch of different colors, which I think is super duper cute. But also, I associate my OC Selwin with like stars and space and all that stuff. So I wanted to draw him in kind of like an astronaut-esque kind of outfit. I want to do a full kind of galaxy or some sort of night sky scene with some mini ores. So I only ended up drawing 2. And for the halfway spreads, I like to put some sort of indication of the halfway mark. So in this case, I am going to be putting text. Other times I do just put halfway somewhere on the page, and sometimes it's just literally written in pen somewhere in the corner or something like that. I don't really remember when exactly I started doing this as a method to kind of keep myself motivated. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but if anything, I will probably still continue to do the halfway mark and a halfway spread if I remember, but I don't think I've recorded every session that I ended up doing for the halfway spreads for previous sketchbooks, but I think this one's kind of fun to look at anyways. So let's talk about process for a little bit. I went ahead and taped off my borders after I did my sketch, which I ended up doing in kind of like a blue color so that I can kind of like paint around it later and not have to worry about any pink or red popping through, since that's not going to really be prominent in the color scheme. And we're doing a little bit of experimenting today. So I believe, was it last Monday's video? I don't really remember which video it was, but I ended up testing out using masking fluid, and it's been like quite a while since I've used it. I think I used it probably over 8 years ago maybe. So it's been quite a while, and when I was using it for that video, I was having a little bit of a struggle because it was tearing up my page. Now luckily, one of you guys actually told me that it might have been the paper, which I was kind of speculating, but also the fact that I was low-key melting the masking fluid probably into my paper, making it harder for me to tear off cleanly after, you know, rubbing it with like an eraser or some sort of tool to peel it from my paper, because the heat from my hairdryer was probably too hot and basically melding it with my page. So this time I did leave it to dry naturally, but then again, I'm using a different type of paper. So this is just very thick, kind of like drawing paper. It's very smooth. It's much more thicker than normal I guess like sketching paper, printer paper, whatever you want to call it, but it's not meant for like any liquid or water mediums or wet mediums, I guess I should say. So I was going to take the chance to see whether or not this was going to work in my sketchbook. And then in the future, I am going to do actual proper testing to see whether or not why am I keep forgetting what it's called? Masking fluid. If the masking fluid is going to cooperate properly with the types of paper that I want to use in the future with watercolors, because if not, then I will just have to make sure whatever's underneath my masking fluid is not going to be painted over top anymore. But I'm going to take advantage of it today because, like I mentioned, I wanted to do some sort of like night sky scene or a galaxy in the background, and I did not want to paint with gouache to dodge every letter that I wanted to have kind of like blocked out. So we are going to be adding the masking fluid, and I'm painting around it and over top of it just to see how durable it's going to be. So I ended up doing a kind of fairly light wash of watercolors just to kind of prime the paper, plan a little bit of the colors, because I knew I wanted to go fairly dark, but I didn't really want to do that work all with watercolors if I'm going to be covering it up completely with gouache. So here is my gouache set, which is the Himi Mia Jelly Gouache, and as usual, I'm just going to start painting in the background and we're going to see how well this is going to work. I definitely think like once I get to painting Selwin, I was a little bit more happier with the application. I went much more loose with the background here, so you can kind of see at the very beginning especially my mixture was very watery. I was not too sure exactly how I wanted to approach painting the background specifically. So as we start painting more and more of the background, I'll eventually get a better consistency for the paint, and then I will start to cover up a little bit more of the areas, add some more colors and stuff. But I treated this kind of like painting session a little bit more loose compared to how I usually paint, because if I could, and if I had the skill to, I would want to make things much more soft and seamless and very either like blended or very crisp and clean. This one's a little bit more painterly, and I don't really care whether or not things were super clean. You'll see a little bit once I start layering in some of the colors. I just really wanted to add in as much of the darkest color right off the bat so that we can layer up lighter colors as we move a little bit forward and then slowly kind of build up our hues and our values. So for the most part, the only places that have the masking fluid is the text, which I found the most important. Other areas were some of the stars in the background. I even made one of the stars that is near Selwyn's kind of body kind of covered with the masking fluid, as well as the Minior's eyes, because they're supposed to be white. But later on, I'll show you guys kind of the result of what happens when I start peeling off the masking fluid from the page, because I was worried about a few things. So I know for certain types of projects or mediums, some people recommend like peeling off your tape at the very end. Some people recommend peeling tape off while things are still wet. So I don't know which is like the best approach, but for me, I was already set that I was gonna peel off the masking fluid at the very end alongside with the tape, as I usually do. But the thing I was scared of is the fact that because gouache is an opaque medium, or it has more of like that buildup compared to watercolors, which is very translucent. You work with typically like thinner layers. It's not really like globs of paint being used. So when I was using the gouache, immediately when I started using kind of like thicker application with more of like a creamier consistency, I ended up covering my masking fluid quite a bit to the point where I lost a lot of my letters, which is not really a bad thing because I wanted to make sure that nothing looks like I was dodging the letters by any means. I wanted to be able to paint on top so that things look a little bit more seamless. But it also means that it was hard for me to identify where I left my masking fluid and whether or not that once I peel off the masking fluid, would I be able to kind of like peel it off cleanly without like tearing a whole layer of paint, if that makes sense. I've also mentioned in like previous gouache videos that because I struggle a lot with gouache, I have found that I definitely feel like I like the kind of like flat square brushes a little bit more than the sharp round brushes, which is typically my favorite when I'm working with watercolors. I think I'm gonna look into some other flat brushes. I was trying to dig around in my old brush sets and like my collection of brushes to see whether or not I had any more kind of like flathead type of watercolor brushes, synthetic brushes, whichever I could own, I guess, or like I did previously own. And I found like really itty bitty tiny ones. So I'm gonna look for something that's like closer to probably a size 6 or a size 8 so that I can have that as a backup potentially. It might be also good to use it with watercolor in the future to block in like some larger areas. But for me, the thing that I found while working with something more of like a flat versus the sharp kind of like round is that I'm able to layer up in a more softer way or build up layers in a more translucent way versus using the sharper brush, which kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. It leaves more of an opaque look, or maybe I'm just like not able to get the same paint ratio because it holds so much paint or holds so much water versus like something wider. And which, at least to me, the tip of the flat ones feel a lot more thinner and more even. So I'm able to kind of layer up certain colors a little bit more easily in thin layers, more consistently at least, that I found, compared to using something like a round. But then again, because I'm so inconsistent with painting with gouache especially, I don't know if this is like a off chance type of thing. So far it happened at least more than once that I've noticed that I preferred at least layering up a lot of my initial layers with gouache with the flat brushes, and then once we need to do like details or line work, then I can go in with like a round or something a little bit more thinner and sharper. I might even look into seeing if I can find like a dagger brush. I definitely have one that's more of like a rounded square brush, but I want to see if I can find a dagger so that if I do get used to it, then I kind of have the option to kind of use both. So something that's a little bit flat, but then the tip of the dagger brush typically is a bit sharper and thinner. So I can use that maybe for line art and detailing, maybe. But hopefully you can kind of see the application of what I'm talking about. So while I was painting Selwin for the most part, I was using both the brush that came in the Himimiya Jelly Gouache set, which is kind of like this nice medium-ish flat brush, which I used to paint majority of Selwin, especially for like the base colors and all that. So I was able to easily layer up things in more of like a translucent type of way and slowly build up my layers, which I liked a lot more, at least in comparison to how I did the background. So the background, I went very loose, very messy. It's kind of like slightly hazy in some areas. The brush strokes are sometimes a little bit more obvious. It's not really blended. But while I was working on Selwin, I was able to kind of like let the colors seem a little bit softer, but kind of build them out in a very, I don't know how to explain the buildup of like the colors in Selwyn's like little astronaut outfit. I just liked it a lot more, and I think that's how gouache is probably used more or less when they're building up layers, because I'm always used to, at least painting more recently with watercolors versus gouache, is the fact that watercolors, I can build up a lot of translucent and transparent layers a lot of the times, but then working with gouache, sometimes I immediately go and use such like a thick application. I guess like even right now when I'm doing Selwyn's hair, I'm basically putting a very thick application down, which I don't hate. I think I have a grasp of how I like to do hair for the most part for most of the characters that I draw, but something where I wanted to have a little bit more variation of color, or I wanted stuff to have like soft gradient in a way, I think using the translucent layers just worked a lot better. So I ended up switching back to like the round brush afterwards, and then being able to do some of the sharper lines, like the little hair strands that kind of surround his face. But every so often I'll kind of like switch back and forth depending on what I needed to do for the painting portion. But I really liked how I painted Selwyn's kind of like astronaut suit. I think it just turned out really cute. I like the lighting, I like the colors. I'm just glad that I was able to do it justice to a certain extent, because I was worried that if I did all this effort for the background, one, the masking fluid was not going to tear properly from the page and maybe I'll ruin the entire thing, or I will hate how I painted Selwyn, so it's like becomes to the point where I get so frustrated where I don't think I can salvage the painting. But I think this one actually turned out really cute in terms of like a halfway spread, and for the most part I'm trying to still every so often use gouache when I can, and it's been kind of my favorite in terms of adding color to my sketchbook as of recently. I don't know if it's because I'm in a very like painting mood. I think more so with watercolors, but I've just been enjoying the kind of bolder colors that I can get from using it in my sketchbook with gouache. I don't know if it's because also I've been just enjoying drawing Selwin in general. I will apologize in advance. So because today is Monday and this is Monday's video, expect another video at least this week that's going to be Selwin focused. Again, I promise it's going to be something cute, but it's going to be a very, I don't know if it's going to be a sporadic video, but it's going to be a little bit weird because it was hard for me to find a good way to film it, so I do apologize about that. But I think the outcome, I'm kind of like I'm about 2/3 of the way finishing whatever I'm working on with Selwin. I think if you watched my stories on Instagram, I did kind of spoil what I'm working on. It's one of the 3-ish projects that I've mentioned in the past that I really wanted to work on as kind of like personal projects. So it's definitely one of those ideas, but I'm also just excited. I want to work on just many illustrations for my OCs again. I want to do the flower zine and hopefully finish it sometime next year is kind of the plan at this point. I feel like I always ask you guys too late in the video, but do you guys ever do halfway spreads in your sketchbook? Or I don't know how common it is because it requires you to figure out where the halfway point is. And like I mentioned, I typically do that like right at the very beginning of like opening up a new sketchbook and committing to it. I will literally count the signatures and then find the middle signature, then count the halfway point between that and just label halfway, close the sketchbook and never look for it ever again until we actually reach that page. And hopefully I don't miss it. I think there was like 1 year that I low-key missed the fact that it was the halfway point, so only like a portion of a doodle represented like the halfway mark and everything else was like random sketches. But maybe that was like the first year, and then every subsequent year is when I started like filming the halfway page as well. I think for the most part though, I've only done the one sketchbook spread with gouache for the halfway page. I've done, I think, alcohol markers twice. I've done water-based markers probably the most. I'm not too sure. I have like memories of like maybe 2 or 3 sketchbook halfway pages. One of them was like Wonu, I think, with like certain type of lighting. Another one was OC related. I think even like the previous sketchbook from last year was also OC related. It might have been also like near Inktober for one of them. So I probably had to like somehow incorporate that into the spread, or because I typically do them outside of my sketchbook at times, maybe I kept them separate but like alluded to the fact that it was kind of in that Inktober-esque time. But I think we're nearing the end of the painting portion for Selwin. There's only a few details like here and there that I need to finish up before we add in the last few elements to the background. So at this point, I think the only thing that I really need to finish painting is the little mini-ors in the background. So at least for me, my favorite of the mini-or are typically like the teal color, the blue one, and the pink one. But to kind of fit the color scheme for today, and I didn't really want them to blend too much into the background completely, so I ended up going with the yellow and the orange version. I mentioned earlier that there are kind of like several different colors for the mini-or. I forget how many. There's even like a black one, which I think is super cute because it has like little rainbow colors of like sprinkled triangles, whatever you want to call it, designs. You'll see a little bit later once I start to paint these mini-ors towards like the end, where they have like little triangle shapes of like a darker color for their entire color scheme, but the black one has like, I think it's like yellow, pink, and blue sprinkled around them. They're super cute, but I didn't want to do the black one because I didn't want him to meld into the background unless I do it like super far away into the sky or something. But I was like very tempted to paint one that was more like that teal color, but I find it a little bit harder for me to keep the luminosity of that color kind of like nice and bright. So to kind of keep it on theme with the background color, I ended up just doing, yeah, like I mentioned, the yellow one and the orange one. Also tried my best when working with acrylic paint as well as like gouache. One method that I like to use often was kind of like dry brushing, so using like a very dry brush with very little paint and almost like dabbing and scrubbing at the page to create kind of like a haziness. So I tried to do that every so often where I could kind of give it a little bit more of that softer glow. So I did add them. You can kind of see like near the mini oars, like the little tips of their points or whatever have a little bit of that teal glow to them, and it looks like they're trailing off a little bit, and I tried my best to add it to like where the text was. I do think that I end up doing a little bit of another layer, but it's not quite dry brushing at that point. It's much more of like a slightly more wet consistency, but I want it to be a little bit brighter before we actually peel off the tape, because the white's going to be very bright and I feel like it might contrast a little bit too much, so I wanted to add at least some more glowing areas to the back while I can before we actually start to peel off the masking fluid from the page, which I was definitely worried about, but I kind of committed in my brain that I have the footage of what this looks like. I also took like some photos just in case if this went very wrong, and I told myself because if it's salvageable enough, I'll just paint over the areas that the masking fluid will end up, kind of like tearing off. You can kind of see I was like referencing my phone right there to make sure that I'm actually peeling off the masking fluid and not just like scratching at the surface for where the gouache is kind of laying down. So for some of the areas that are completely covered in gouache, I am using my X-Acto knife to kind of peel up an edge or two, or some way for me to rub away our masking fluid from the page. So after I did the first star, I was actually having very high hopes because it actually did a very well job of protecting the paper and the page. Now, I did see someone comment recently on the masking fluid video on whether or not this would work with alcohol markers, and I think in a future video I'll definitely give it a try. I might do a little bit testing because alcohol markers, unlike my gouache and my watercolor, I feel like has such a more finite amount of ink that I don't want to just like willy-nilly mess around with it and just like run out of certain colors. That's kind of like the reason why oftentimes I like kind of like painting mediums, because you can get a lot out of typically like the tub or like the pans that you're using. Especially watercolors, they last for a very, very long time, because if your watercolors are very pigmented, then you're not going to use like a heck of a lot of that pan right away. I guess gouache is a little bit more limited because you are using it up, and I guess get more of like that thicker consistency, which you need to cover up more stuff, or like you're using a little bit more of that paint, I guess. But here's kind of what the halfway spread looks like. I'm trying to get rid of some of the debris. I also almost missed doing the eyes, so masking fluid from the eyes, I'm just peeling those off. But you can kind of see that the text and for the most part the stars were protected quite well. There were some areas that I did not apply the masking fluid super evenly, so the paint did seep through, but because the paper did not absorb the paint in the same way, I was able to kind of scratch the surface with the X-Acto knife to kind of take up and peel off the pigment a little bit to kind of make sure that the text was more clean instead of having random speckles or random streaks. But yeah, this is kind of the end result of our sketchbook page right here. I don't know. I just really like how this one actually ended up. I'm glad that I ended up doing this one with gouache instead of like a different medium. I might still do a digital version, who knows? But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me ramble and kind of do this painting session. And I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!